Welcome into another edition of Chasing the Ring, presented by Lammons Fine Jewelry. I'm Neal McCready. Carson McCready here with me as well today. We'll be with you for, 30, 45 minutes, somewhere in there, and then we'll have hand-raised guys tonight, 7 o'clock. Chase Parham will be here. We'll talk about the latest things that are going on at Ole Miss, a coaching hire today, some coaching rumors. We'll talk about the crazy rumors out of Knoxville. We'll do all of those things, but before we do that, we're going to talk some NBA here today on the show. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you about the people at Lammons Fine Jewelry. Lammons need to fix my screen there. Lammons is located at 1126 North Lamar Boulevard in Oxford. They've been serving the Oxford area for more than 73 years. From engagement rings to wedding rings to fine jewelry, watches, pearls, fashion jewelry, children's jewelry, collectibles, and more. Lammons is the gold standard in fine jewelry. So visit them at lammonsfinejewelry.com or call them at 662-234-2777. They also do jewelry repair. You can go in with some an old piece, have it refurbished, have it cleaned. You can repurpose it. So we've done all of those things during our almost 13 years here in Oxford, exclusively using Lammons for all of our jewelry needs. I suggest that you do the same as well. Carson, how are you?
Good.
I had a question. We'll start here. We're going to talk about the Brooklyn Big Three. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I had a question in my mailbag at rebelgrove.com earlier this week. It was, what got you into basketball? And for me, the answer, I thought about it because I was like, well, what got me into basketball? And when I was a little kid, I was 9 years old. I actually kind of thought about how this sort of parallels with you a little bit. When I was 9 years old, there was a lot of hype around the national championship game. Michigan State and Indiana State both made the Final Four. And TV was different then, obviously. It wasn't around the clock coverage the way it is now. We didn't have phones. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. So it was, you would read in the paper about these two players that
Bird and Magic.
Yeah, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And so I watched that game on that Monday night. And Al McGuire called it. I think the game was televised on NBC. And Michigan State won. Magic Johnson's team beat Larry Bird's team. And then you knew, because the draft was different then, Larry Bird had already signed with the Celtics. He was going to be a Celtic, and then Magic was the first pick in the draft to the Los Angeles Lakers. And so starting that next year, and this was back then, the NBA games were tape delayed. Do you know what that means? So like the game would get played at, 7 o'clock or earlier in the day, and then you'd see the tape of the game later. And so that next year, 1980, 1981, whatever that was, Magic Johnson and the Lakers won a title. They beat the Philadelphia 76ers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was superstar center for the Lakers, got hurt, couldn't play in game 6, I think it was. So Magic Johnson plays center and scores 40-something points, leads the Lakers to a title, and I just kind of got hooked. I got hooked on those teams, and then I would get it because of the 1979 NCAA tournament. I started getting into the tournament, and so when I was a kid, when the tournament would come out on Selection Sunday in March, I would have these two big poster boards. I mean, I'm such a goob. I had these two big poster boards, and I had the brackets all laid out, and I had the poster boards stapled together, and I would write the teams down as it came down. Like St. John's, Arkansas, Villanova, Georgetown, UCLA, Florida, whatever, Kentucky. And, I didn't really have a favorite team. But now that I think about it, I kind of got lucky a little bit as a kid because I grew up in Ruston, as you know, and we would go to Louisiana Tech games. And so when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, Louisiana Tech was great in basketball. They had a power forward named Karl Malone who was phenomenal. And they were fun to watch. And so I would watch to see where Louisiana Tech was in the bracket and all that stuff. got to go to the the Southland Conference tournaments, and I'd see Joe Dumars, who went on to be a star with the Pistons, and Karl Malone and Calvin Nat played at what is now ULM, and he went on to play for the Nuggets for years. And anyway, I just got into it, and the tournament was fun, and then it would end, and then the NBA playoffs would get going, and I was into the Lakers, and the Lakers were so good, and the Celtics were so good, and there was this heated rivalry, and we didn't get to see it all the time. So you weren't inundated with it the way that your generation is, where you guys can watch anytime you want to. You can watch anything. You can get up in the morning like you do. You like to get up and watch your highlights and stuff. We didn't really have that. I guess you sort of had it on SportsCenter a little bit by then, but that's what kind of got me into it. And so by then I'm into college and stuff, and now Michael Jordan's coming, and so it was that way. So I'm curious for you. I thought about it for you. I'm like, I wonder what got you in, because I know it's not the sport that you play the most. You play soccer the most. You've gotten to go to a World Series game. You've seen the Cubs in the World Series. I know you live in this house. You have no choice but to hear a lot about baseball. What is it about basketball that got you so into it?
Well, at the time, what year was it? 2013, 12.
Yeah, probably 2012. You were 7 years old. And
I remember that Durant MVP year. That was probably his, maybe not his best year, but one of his best years of all time. Seeing him, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, for a couple of years, Harden.
Yeah.
All of them play together, how good they were. It was just super fun to watch. And like you said, you just got hooked.
Yeah, because you got to watch the Thunder get so close in 12, and then the Harden trade, and then
they were just dominant from then on, until 2016, where they got reverse sweeped.
Yeah, they were up. Well, they're up 3-1 over the Warriors. That was pretty disappointing.
Yeah,
that whole deal. And that's where then Kevin Durant leaves for Golden State, and you got to realize the NBA is kind of a business. And then, I think for you were 10 years old then. I think for you, when Durant left, it became less about the Thunder and more about the rest of the NBA. You started watching other teams. You weren't just obsessed with what Oklahoma City did each night.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, over the past 2 years, I've gotten latched on to all these teams. I know most of the players at this point. I just got hooked onto it.
Yeah, it's a fun product. This has been such a weird year this year because you get all the COVID cancellations. I had this up, the NBA. They've shut the Grizzlies down now. The Grizzlies are shut down for 3 or 4 games. They're doing sort of what the NFL did. The difference is in the NFL, you play 1 game a week, and so you can shut it down for a few days and maybe push a game back. Like some NFL games got played on Tuesdays this year, You can push games back, and you can make up in the NBA where you've got 3-4 games a week. When you shut a team down for a week, they miss a lot. It's going to be interesting to see how they make up all these games. Do they push the playoffs back, which is the easy fix on this? Or are they stubborn and try to make up these games and get the season in to get back on the normal schedule? I'm thinking you're going to see them push everything back. And instead of finishing in June, they're going to finish in July. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like the NBA starting at Christmas time.
It's always a great time of the year. And opening day for the NBA, it's always a fun time. And the Christmas games are always fun to watch, too. I think that just brings more high spirit to the return of the league, I guess.
So we have a couple of questions. We have one in here about Harden. He says Harden was like MJ in the Western Conference Finals in 2012. He was. It's a funny thing because James Harden is no longer in Houston. And now you can go back and you can dissect or judge, I guess, the Thunder Rockets trade in October of 2013 that sent James Harden to Oklahoma City into Houston in exchange for Kevin Martin And
what became Steven Adams.
Yeah, it was Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and what became Steven Adams. And look, there's no way around it. The Rockets won the trade. James Harden is a Hall of Fame player, MVP, 3-time scoring champ. I will say this, though, and not to defend the Thunder on this, but it's something that I've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to some people in Oklahoma City who are pretty connected to the organization. And there's a couple of things there that I think is easy to gloss over. One is that James Harden wasn't going to stay more than one more year. He was going to leave. The Thunder knew it. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. The Thunder knew it, and they offered him an extension, and when he didn't take it, they said, okay, if we keep him here and he gets disgruntled, like he did in Houston later, this could break this up. They knew they had something special in Durant and in Westbrook and in Ibaka, and at the time Kevin Martin was an elite shooter. It's funny how history judges something because Russell Westbrook ends up getting hurt in the Rockets series. They beat the Rockets. They lose to the Grizzlies. People, a lot of Grizzlies fans around here might argue this. It's my opinion the Thunder would have beaten the Grizzlies with Russell Westbrook. It would have been close, and it would have been tough, but I think they would have won the series. I think the Thunder would have won the championship that year. They had the best record in basketball, and I think we would judge it differently today. But regardless, the Thunder thought there was a chance he could mess things up. They thought they could get value for him, and I don't think they knew how good he was. So it's kind of complicated. He goes to Houston. He doesn't win a title in Houston. The Thunder obviously never won a title without him in Oklahoma City. That part's a wash. I think it's so easy to go back and go, well, the Thunder would have done this if Harden would have stayed. And I just think it's false. I don't think James Harden was going to happily be a third wheel for very long in Oklahoma City behind Durant and possibly behind Westbrook. I just don't think he was going to do it, and I think they knew it. The interesting thing would have been what would have happened if instead of moving. This kind of gets us into the modern stuff right now. We're going to get to some of y'all's questions in the stream in a minute too. Yeah, two things happened at the NBA Finals when they played at Miami. If you remember, the Thunder and the Heat split the first two games in Oklahoma City. They go to Miami to play 3. Thunder just need to win one game to bring it back to Oklahoma City. And Harden partied every night in Miami, like crazy partied. Played terrible those 3 games in Miami. And people in the Thunder organization were pissed off. And they felt betrayed, frankly, by him. They thought it was immature. And it led to more serious looks at moving him. But when people do that, well, what would they have done? What I was getting at was I think one of the things that would be interesting to ask Sam Presti this, and we watched this the other night with Harden and Durant playing together before Kyrie got there. What would have happened if instead of moving Harden, they'd moved Westbrook? What would have happened if instead of moving Harden, they'd made Harden their point guard?
I mean, people can say all they want about Harden becoming that the scoring champ he became in Houston if he had stayed with OKC, but no way he would have amounted to nearly what he is now. Because, I mean,
playing with Durant?
Yeah, I mean, still.
In Oklahoma City?
Even with Durant, I think, yeah.
See, I thought that, Carson, too, until I watched these last couple of games with Brooklyn. We watched a game the other night. They were playing Orlando. And you're watching James Harden, who's probably 15 pounds overweight right now. No big deal. I think the weight thing's a little overplayed. He's playing his way back into shape. He was chunky, but he's all right. He's going to be okay. He's still a great player. I watched him facilitate playing the point for Brooklyn. And it made me wonder, honestly, and I know we love Russell in this house. We're Westbrook fans. But it made me wonder, what if you'd put Harden at the point, gone and gotten a couple of shooters in exchange for Westbrook who had real value and let Harden facilitate in an offense with Kevin Durant, who is an elite scorer, what would have happened? How would history have changed? And we'll never know. These are just hypotheticals. And Durant ended up having the foot problem, and he missed a full season. And there was a lot of stuff there. There was more to the Thunder than just the Harden trade. But it did make me wonder because, man, they looked really good the other night with Joe Harris out on the wing, who's a just stone-cold shooter. The rest of that team's just kind of like dudes. And you have Jeff Green and you have DeAndre Jordan, and you just have some old guys and Harris and just some
people. There's nothing to it.
Just some people.
Stars. Yeah.
Just people.
Yeah.
And then you got Harden facilitating, Durant, who's this lethal scorer right now, playing MVP caliber basketball like he was back in the day. And you've got the ability for Harden now to do what he still can. He brings some of what he had in Houston. That doesn't do it nearly as much, but he can do that whole step back and dribble, step back, knock a three down, and score at will. And it did make me kind of wonder.
Well, and I just don't think with the Rockets, he was always the guy. He was never a side piece to anybody. And I think with Durant, that just wouldn't have I don't think that would have made his career the way it would have been now.
You don't think he would have been happy ultimately with that? He did want his own team.
Right.
And even if they had moved Westbrook,
I still think
it would have been Durant's team, and he would have been. I think you're right. I think that's the irony of it all. The way that it's judged in hindsight is people say, well, Westbrook was this divisive guy. The truth is, from talking to multiple people in Oklahoma City, Westbrook was more than willing to be Robin to Kevin Durant's Batman. And I don't know that Harden would have been. In the end, I think they made the right decision. It's just, you always talk about sometimes things just don't work out. Westbrook had the injury in 13. Ibaka had the injury in 14 in that Clippers. At the end of the Clippers series, they ended up losing to the Spurs. Durant missed the 15 season. And then in 16, Klay Thompson was unconscious in Game 6. He was unconscious in Game 6. Everything was in place for them to win a title in 16. And if they win a title in 16, Durant probably stays.
Horford comes here.
Al Horford comes in. They made the Victor Oladipo trade. And now you've got this Warriors-Thunder rivalry that would have been just freaking intense.
Right.
And who knows how all that would have played out. But instead,
Durant moves.
Yeah.
It's 2 easy championships.
Yeah. And so here we are today, and Oklahoma City's in rebuild mode. Harden doesn't have a title. Westbrook doesn't have a title. People are still questioning Kevin Durant, which leads me into this. We've now seen Brooklyn a couple of times. And last night, Brooklyn played with Kyrie Irving for the first time with Harden and Durant. They lost in double overtime to Cleveland, but I'm not hung up on that. What have you thought so far of James Harden in Brooklyn? How does that change the Nets?
Well, I think he's looked like a lot better of a player. The way he's just not just been that guy who just scores the ball, plays ISO ball. He's let Durant do his thing because Durant's the second net in franchise history, I think, who's gotten 30 or 3 straight 30-point games. And every night the past couple nights every night with Brooklyn, he's put up nearly or triple-double numbers.
Talking about Harden?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, Durant's putting up like 34 a game, but you'll see Harden getting like 14 assists a game, and it's just the fact he's doing that and still putting up, say, 25 numbers in there, 20+.
So I thought that it was not going to work, and it still might not work. And I know they lost to Cleveland last night, and people got a reminder of just how much of a scorer Colin Sexton is and how good of a young player he is. But I'll tell you what I liked about Brooklyn the last couple of times I've watched them. Harden looks happy again. He's having fun. Durant can score with anyone. Like you can take any collection of NBA players and put them on a floor, 4 dudes with Kevin Durant, and he's going to score. He's just a scorer. He may be the best pure scorer in the league. I was telling you the other day, he reminds me so much of – he kind of reminds me of, like we talked about at the beginning, he reminds me a lot of Larry Bird in his prime. He can score any way. Bird could score right-handed, left-handed. He could drive. He could beat you from the perimeter. He could get inside. And Durant's a better Larry Bird.
Yeah, he's like
which is saying something because Bird was a special player. Yeah. Durant's a better Larry Bird. But my point about them is that offensively they can, like Bird could before he got hurt during the prime of his career, Bird could just score. And Durant can just score with just about anybody. His game's interchangeable in a lot of ways. But what I've liked about them is now with Kyrie back is they're pretty versatile with what they can do. They can play Kyrie and Durant together and let Harden sit. They can take Harden by himself and let him play his Houston style. The one concern I have for Brooklyn, and I'll pull up the East standings right now as you look at kind of where things stand right now. The one thing that I'm a little concerned about with Brooklyn is, do they have enough guys who can defend? Do they have enough guys in a playoff situation where the games slow down, where teams lock in? Do they have the ability to win a game where they don't score 120 points? And I don't know that they have the ability to defend anyone. Harden's not a good defender. Irving's an average defender. KD can be a good defender, sometimes a great defender. But you're not going to get a lot of defense from Joe Harris. You're not going to get a lot of defense from DeAndre Jordan anymore. Jeff Green's a solid defender, but Jeff Green's getting a little older now. There's just not a lot of guys that can lock you down on that team. And I wonder if that's going to haunt them in a playoff series against a Milwaukee, against a Boston, against a Philly, against teams that are really good physical defensive teams when those teams lock in on you.
That team, it's not deep at all. You have those, you could say 3-4 guys who are just crazy players, score at ease, but their defense is not good, other than, I guess you could say Durant.
Yeah, Durant can be a really good defender. Durant's an underrated defender when he's locked in. Right. Kevin Durant, is
top 15 player of all time. Yeah,
and I think he's got a chance to be top 5, top 6 player of all time. Course. Yeah.
And he's only 31 right now. So.
Yeah. I mean, he's lost 2 seasons completely to injury.
Right.
Which impacts his legacy. But man, he's special.
The fact he still came back from all that with all the doubt he got.
Well, the way he's playing off of an Achilles injury,
right,
is remarkable. But I do wonder, and Grind has a really good question in the thread. Would Harden take a 6-man role when needed in the playoffs? I don't think he'd take a traditional 6th-man role. I think that would be too much of a blow to his ego. But I do wonder if through the heat of a playoff series, if he would come out early so that he could be the guy that leads that second unit, that gives your first unit rest, that lets Kevin Durant, lets Kyrie Irving not get worn down so that those guys can go make plays in the fourth quarter. Is Harden willing to accept that role where he's not playing as many minutes initially in the game, initially in the third quarter of games? Was part of his problem in Oklahoma City was that, they wanted to use him as a 6th man.
That's not at all what he wanted.
It's not what he wanted.
He wanted his team. That's all he wanted, really.
Yeah, not to go back. Yeah, it's funny because not to go back through the whole Redux thing, but after the 12 season, Harden had made the Olympic team, and Scott Brooks, now the coach of the Wizards, he was the coach of the Thunder at the time, he sat down with Harden and said, we're going to start you at the 2. And they played a couple of preseason games in 13 with Harden at the 2, and it did not go well. And then they came back and said, what would you think about being the 6th man again? And he's like, I don't want to do it. Now, okay, well, we'll start you. And it became this that's where a lot of the conflict started. He was what would have made that team great. I mean, I can't even imagine how good that team would have been long term had James Harden said, we talked about this a week ago, I won't belabor it. So many of the Thunder people, Presti and all those guys, came from the San Antonio Spurs organization. They'd been around Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan. That was the big three they were emulating. They all thought, we've got James Harden, who's a superior Manu Ginobili. And Manu Ginobili was kind of selfless. He would be that sixth man. He would come in. He'd lead the second unit. He could facilitate. Then he could play off Parker. He and Tim Duncan's, their games were beautiful together. And when the three of them got going together, they were nasty. And then you brought in a young Kawhi Leonard, and look out, here we go.
Right. And you see them when they won a championship, or
oh yeah, the Spurs, yeah,
one or two.
They won a couple, didn't they, with that group? I mean, I can't maybe one more than that. They thought Harden would be a Ginobili, and Harden's better than Ginobili, but Harden did not want that role. So anyway, I like their team. I look at standings though, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, you look at like it's about to roll on the screen again. It's Philly's right there. And these are your Eastern Conference standings as of, if you're listening to this later, this is as of the afternoon of January the 21st. You've got the Sixers at 10-5, the Bucks at 9-5. The Bucks play the Lakers tonight. It'll be a fantastic game. The Celtics quietly playing really good basketball. Indiana, even without Karis LeVert.
I don't think, and speaking of the Celtics, I do not think they have Tatum right now. I think he's
he's not back.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
is
getting.
Is he hurt or is he COVID?
No, I think it's injury, but I think he's coming back soon. And you were talking about Jaylen Brown's having a great year. I mean, look, it's Brooklyn's not going to have a free run to the finals. They're just not. I mean, they're going to have to.
The East is getting a lot better.
The East is better. Milwaukee's really good.
Right.
Philly's really good. Boston's going to be really good. I mean, that top four is going to be interesting. Let's see, G21, G210 Reb says there was only one Manu. Yeah, Manu Ginobili was fantastic. I'm just telling you, if James Harden would have embraced that role long term,
and that's the thing, because
Manu embraced that role.
Manu was the guy who just wanted to win. He outright, all he wanted to do was win, get titles, just for the organization. He did not care to perform the way Harden did. You see Harden's ISO ball, and you compare that to Manu. And Manu never.
And Harden didn't do that with the Thunder.
No.
I mean, with the Thunder, Harden. I don't know if you remember this. Harden would come in and lead that second unit, and it was James Harden and Nick Collison. It was kind of James Harden, Nick Collison, who was a good player, and then just kind of some dudes out there, and they would light people up. Harden, as a young player, the pick and roll with Nick Collison before Nick Collison's body broke down, they were really fun to watch. I mean, the way they interacted and did things and the way they fed off one another. And then Harden would move off the ball when Westbrook and Durant came back in, and they just out-athlete people up and down the floor. And you had a young Serge Ibaka, and they brought in Kendrick Perkins, who gave him a big body, and he didn't give him much else. But they were interesting. You know, Collison sometimes would play the five, and they'd punish you a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Big Three thing's fun to watch. It's made for a fun story. I'm just curious, like I said, as we wrap that subject. Yeah, they won 4 or 5 titles. Spurs. They won a bunch. Would have won more if Ray Allen doesn't hit that shot. And you all right? Okay.
Raising the seat.
They would have won more if Ray Allen doesn't make that shot in Miami that day. I mean, and then they came back and won the next year. So we'll switch to the West. Yeah, we'll have hand raised guys at 7:00. I'm gonna switch to the West. You got figure out how to do this right here. There it is. Western Conference standings again as of January 21. Clippers and Lakers both 11-4. Again, the Lakers tonight against the Bucks. The rest of the NBA schedule tonight is the Pelicans at the Jazz. Speaking of the Jazz, they're up to 10-4 right now. You watch them much?
Yeah, I've watched a pretty decent bit of them.
Yeah, well, they're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming. Donovan Mitchell beginning to play like Donovan Mitchell. Rudy Gobert beginning to play like Rudy Gobert. They've got pieces all over the place.
Ingles can shoot. Who else do they have? I mean, is Derek Favors still there, or is he with the Pelicans?
Let's see, because that's who they play tonight. It's the Pels. Pulling up the Jazz. Looking for stats. The stats would be a much better deal. I mean, their roster is Clarkson, Ingles, Shaquille Harrison, Mike Conley, Derek Favors still there. Royce O'Neal, who's playing really well, Rudy Gobert, Bojan Bogdanovic, Donovan Mitchell, Mie Oni, the rookie, kind of come in and played really good defense for them. He's not going to be a part of their rotation probably long term, but he's given them some really good COVID period minutes. And I think Quinn Snyder's one of the more underrated coaches in the league. His ability to maneuver lineups week after week after week. Conley's been really good for them this year. Really, it's the first time that I think Mike Conley has looked comfortable in Utah, playing with Gobert, playing with Mitchell. Gobert's such a unique player because of his size and all that stuff, but he's skilled and you have to work with him. But he's a completely different player than, say, Marc Gasol was all those years in Memphis when Conley operated that offense with those two. Gobert's a different player, a better player. But he demands the ball, and Mitchell demands the ball. And I think Donovan Mitchell's a superstar. I know you do too. I think Utah is a dangerous team. Yeah, Mitchell's getting 23.5 right now per game, 3.7 boards, 4.9 assists. They're coming. I mean, he had 28. His last 3 games, he's gone 26, 27, 28. He's a special player. So they play the Pelicans tonight. Pelicans kind of off to a little bit of a shaky start. I don't think New Orleans is there yet.
No, they're just super duper young. I mean, their oldest player now is Steven Adams. Maybe some old veteran, but a guy that doesn't do much.
Portland's 8-6, but C.J. McCollum's out for a while. That's going to hurt them. The West is so tight that an injury like that could take you out for a while. It could knock you down, and you don't want to fall to that 7-8 spot where you've got the Lakers, the Clippers in a first-round matchup. We criticize the Clippers some, but the Clippers are off to a really great start. I mean, they're right there.
Paul George has picked it up.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing well. Denver's playing better. They're coming along. Dallas is looking like they're getting better. The West is something. I'll tell you, and you talked about this in the car today. Golden State. You can't help but wonder, they're off to an 8-6 start. They've beaten the Lakers. They've beaten the Clippers. Can't help but wonder how good they would have been if Klay Thompson hadn't gotten hurt in the preseason.
Well, and that's the thing, because next year, if he's healthy and he's playing, they'll have Curry, who's obviously just one of the best point guards of all time.
One of the best pure shooters ever.
Yeah, that too. Thompson, who is one of the best shooters, if not, he's probably like a top 5 at least shooter of all time.
Well, when you're a Thunder fan, he's pretty elevated because he's the guy that single-handedly broke your heart. Yeah.
But and they'll also have Wiseman, who's in his second year. He'll have some more experience. I mean, he's what, 19, 20?
Yeah, I mean, he would be a sophomore in college. Yeah, he's 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, and he's putting up probably.
I'm pulling up Wiseman's stats right now. I'm curious to see what he is doing. I haven't, they play so many late games. Draymond Green's been better this year than a lot of people thought he would be. Wiseman getting 11.4 and 6 a game.
Rebounds or assists? I'm assuming rebounds.
Rebounds, yeah. He has a half an assist a game. I mean,
Right.
he's not he's nowhere close to a facilitator at this point.
Of course, yeah.
His last few games, he's gone. He went 20 points last night against the Spurs. Only went 4 2 days earlier in that game against the Lakers. 18 at Denver. 8 at home against Indiana.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's just shaky right now.
He's a rookie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not much you can expect. But second year in the NBA, I think you have plenty more experience. You know what to expect. You probably have developed a better play style.
Grind asked in the thread. I don't know whether you've watched much of the college game at all. You haven't watched a lot of college basketball.
No.
He says, should Sharif Cooper, the Auburn point guard, who just missed the first part of the season, just got cleared, played the other day.
He had a really good game the other day.
Yeah, I don't know what he did last night. Auburn had a weird game last night in Arkansas. Auburn had a great first half, dominated, and then just kind of fell apart in the second half. Arkansas came back and beat them. Look, I think if I'm Cooper, I try to stay another year in college, but I get it. I mean, if you get that first-round grade.
I mean, if he keeps up his play level, he's guaranteed at least a lottery pick, high lottery pick.
If he waits another year, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying
you think Sharif Cooper's a lottery pick this year?
I mean, if he keeps up his play level, he certainly could be.
Well, if you're a lottery pick, you got to go.
Yeah.
Because the money's too good.
That's my point. I'm saying if he keeps up his play level, I mean, I'm not sure how many points he's putting up, how well he's playing, but
he's playing really well. He just hadn't played a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm saying if he keeps that up, who knows?
Boy, the Warriors are a weird team, aren't they? Andrew Wiggins is on that team, getting 18 a night.
And I just don't know what I think about him.
He's just such a different player. I mean,
he's really good, but he's been in the league for
a long time. Kelly Oubre's getting 12 and 5, almost 6 a game. They're just such a weird team. They were built for one thing. They were built for Klay Thompson, and then when he gets hurt, they had to kind of scramble, and you can sort of see what they're doing. Curry's 30 years old, getting 28 a game. Draymond's had a better year. The Warriors are funny. They're just a kind of a funny team. Phoenix has played well. They're at the 4 spot right now. We talked about it a lot. Chris Paul's been a stabilizing force for that team. DeAndre Ayton's playing better. It's allowed Devin Booker to grow up. Memphis is playing better with Ja Morant. Memphis is 7-6 right now. They're shut down for a little while, but the only guy on their team that has tested positive for COVID is Valanciunas. Everybody else is like contact trace, so they've shut them down, which may end up kind of being a good thing for Memphis because it lets Ja get a little bit more time to get completely healed. But, man, he's a stud. Grind says, me and my friends argue about Wiggins being a bust all the time. He says he was the number 1 overall pick.
And I kind of think he was a bust in ways, and also I kind of don't. He's one of those guys that it can go either way.
He's never completely bought into playing for a team.
No.
He always seems to be disgruntled. He always seems to be the subject of trade rumors.
Yeah, 'cause he's been on, what, at this point, 3-4 teams? At least 3.
He's been Minnesota,
Cleveland, and now
Golden State.
Yeah.
Maybe one more. I lose track.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I mean, he's just kind of one of those guys who I really, like you said, or like I said, I think he could go either way.
Celtics and Sixers tomorrow night. A dog of a game that's interesting, though, because of first-round picks. The Rockets and the Pistons. The Rockets struggling. Pistons have been bad outside of Jeremy Grant. We talked about that a week ago. Mavericks and Spurs play tomorrow night. Nuggets and Suns. Thunder and Clippers. Grizzlies were supposed to play at Portland. That game's been postponed because of COVID. All right, you got a question. They want to know, do you think Kyra Lewis will eventually, with the Pelicans, will eventually play to the level of Colin Sexton.
I mean,
Both Alabama guys. That's the reason
right,
for the
yeah.
comparison.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah, I don't.
He's not getting much playing time right now, is he?
He's playing. I can pull him up. He's playing. He's playing a good bit for a rookie. Pulling his roster up now. Sexton was an elite college player.
And when Sexton came in, there was no point guard already there.
Well, I mean, he was so good that he would have replaced anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a one and done at Alabama. Lewis getting 4.2 points a game, almost a rebound a game.
How many minutes?
1.3 assists. He's played the last 5 games. He's played 4, 15, 11, 16, and 3 minutes for the Pelicans, who've had some COVID stuff because they haven't played a lot of. They've missed some games, I think, or he might have missed some games with some injuries or whatnot. No, I don't think he's Sexton. He's a really athletic potential 3-and-D one guy. Talking about Wiggins for a minute, I don't think Wiggins has ever been the number one scoring option on a team. He was in Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns, which is another topic as we get closer and closer. We'll talk about this as we get closer to the trade deadline. The Timberwolves are going nowhere. This isn't going to work. Karl Anthony Towns is probably going to start getting talked about as a trade chip.
And you can't forget D'Angelo Russell.
I wouldn't want Karl Anthony Towns right now. He's had a tragic offseason, and I absolutely feel for him. Don't get me wrong. The human being, Karl Anthony Towns, I absolutely feel for him. If I'm a basketball executive, I'm having some wonders. How much does basketball mean to him? And don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing the loss of his parent or anything like that. His mom, and then he's had some other stuff. COVID's been rough on his family.
Really? Yeah,
but I do wonder, he talks about basketball not mattering, and I wonder how much of that is the grief talking and how much of that is the truth talking. Because they're not good, and that's his team. And first-round picks are going to be hard to come by. And if you're Minnesota, you have to start thinking about moving Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah, I just don't know what you could get for him. I mean,
you could get a lot. You could get a package of picks. The question is, if you're a team that has a stock of picks right now, the Rockets, the Thunder, the Pelicans.
See, and I wouldn't want him. I would, if I were especially in the Thunder right now, I do not want Karl Anthony Towns.
25 years old, 22 points a game, 12.5 rebounds a game, 4.3 assists. His last 5 games, he's gone 20, 22, 16, 25, and 25.
I might want him, but at the same time,
I'd have to know that he was wanting to play basketball, that he was wanting to lead a franchise, because he's the type of player that needs to be the face of a franchise, and he has struggled with that in Minnesota.
Yeah, that
Brian says the Nets should get him. Carson thinks, I'll let you make your case, Carson thinks that the Nets should say screw it and trade Kyrie and get more pieces.
Like, I guarantee you could trade Kyrie, get a defensive player that could say shoot.
So a 3-and-D.
Yeah.
You could get some picks back because they've completely traded their future. Their future's locked up in this 2-3 year run. I'm just going to tell you, anybody else who thinks it, they're not trading Kyrie. They're going for it.
I know they're
with
not
these
going
guys.
to, but I wish they would. I feel like that'd make their team a lot more, not just
make it more balanced.
Yeah, because right now it's just that 3-headed snake.
It's a hell of a snake.
Yeah,
man, they're legit. All right, we'll wrap there. So we won't have a show next Thursday. I'll be out of town, so we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll maybe do a mailbag type of show. Let you guys ask some questions. We'll get to them. Chase will be in at 7:00. Yeah, Grind says I would trade Kyrie, but only for the right pieces. I think it's what Carson says too, and I think y'all are both probably right. I'm just going to tell you, that deal's not happening. It's not happening. They're going to live or die with this group. They're determined to do it. So it'll be fascinating to see. So we'll be back in a couple weeks with another edition of Chasing the Ring. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back with hand raise guys in about an hour and 15 minutes or so. So we'll see you guys hopefully later this evening. We'll take some calls, talk about the latest in college football, college basketball, and whatever else might come up. For Carson McCready, I'm Neal McCready. That does it for this edition of Chasing the Ring. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon.